Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Let's Make a Manga. In episodes 1 and 2, we covered ways to generate story ideas and creating characters. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about plotting out your story ideas. So you probably now have all of these story ideas in your head, but now we need to take those ideas and actually make a cohesive story plot. So that's what we're going to be discussing in this video. So let's get started. Now what I mean by plotting is we want to get a general idea of how we want our story to go. We're not going to go into major detail. We're just basically going to get an idea of how we want each chapter of the story to go. Or I guess if you're making like a one shot that only has one chapter, you just want to have an idea of how that one chapter will go. So basically you just kind of want to be able to arrange your ideas into a way that makes sense and have a plot for your story. You're going to want to probably write a brief summary of each chapter as you go. So like say chapter 1. In chapter 1, blah 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 happens. Just like a little short paragraph of what happens in each chapter. You don't go into major detail. You start doing that in the scripting phase, which we're going to be covering in the next video. But for now, we're just focusing on getting the general idea of how we want our plot to flow. Before we go into ways to plot out stories, I thought I'd give a few tips. Tip number 1, make sure your story has a conflict. Now, if you're making a more of a slice of life, very easygoing kind of gag comic, you don't necessarily need a conflict. Now, a conflict is basically something that is working against the character. Like in my comic, I Want to Be a Magical Girl, the conflict is the villain that appears later in the story. Or in my one-shot White Day, the conflict is the main character is struggling with his fear because he's scared of telling the girl he likes that he likes her. Or in My Next Door Neighbors, the conflict is kind of Dorish trying to overcome her shyness. So the conflict can be an internal conflict or an external conflict, but the conflict is kind of what moves the story along, so having a conflict in your story can be very helpful for the plot. Tip number 2 is to start simple and build off of the simple ideas. I think sometimes people maybe overwhelm themselves a little bit, including myself, thinking we need to make these grand big worlds with lots of chapters in the story, and there's going to be tons of details and background information that kind of gets overwhelming. So start simple, and as you keep writing your story, as you keep plotting out your story, it'll kind of just keep growing and you'll keep adding things to it as you go, and it won't seem as overwhelming. So start simple and it'll just kind of keep snowballing. I guess it's kind of like a snowball effect. Okay, so now on to the ways that you can plot out your story. Number 1 is the introduction, development, turn, conclusion method. Now this method is used for many, if not almost all stories. So basically you have the introduction where you meet the character, what kind of world they live in, maybe who does the character know, what's their life like. We basically meet the character and the character's surroundings. In the development phase, the story starts developing. So let's take a superhero story for example. So in the introduction, we have our superhero, we meet our superhero and what their daily life is like, and then the superhero gets their superpowers. So in the development stage, maybe the hero starts developing their powers, they start learning about their powers, how to use them, and maybe they meet a person that can help them train to use their powers because this person also has superpowers, so they know what they're doing. So they help train the superhero to make their powers more usable to them. They get better at using their powers is what I'm trying to say. And then we have the turn. Now the turn is when something unexpected happens or the story turns from where you thought it was going. So in the development phase, the hero starts learning how to use their powers. Everything's going good. He's stopping the bad guys on the streets and everything's going great. But then it turns out that that mentor that was helping the superhero turns out to be the bad guy, and he was just trying to find a weakness of the superhero. So the mentor ends up being the bad guy, and that's our turn. And then the superhero has to fight his mentor, and there's a big battle and all of that dramatic stuff. And then after the turn, and after he defeats the bad guy, we have our conclusion. How does the fight end? Does he win? And we're gonna just say he wins, he beats the bad guy, and then everything becomes more calm again, and we get the conclusion. The story ends. So that's kind of a basic idea of how a story plot will flow. So if you have ideas in your head, maybe try to fit those ideas into the different categories. Like, should this go in the introduction area, or the turn area, or should this maybe be towards the end? Try to fit your ideas into the different phases of the story plot. Number 2, the episode technique. So the episode technique is basically where you write down all of the ideas you have for your stories. Even the smallest thing, like, oh, the character trips down the stairs and their love interest catches them. Or the main character bumps into someone, like Doris does. Or a side character gives the main character a present. Just like any ideas you have for this story. And then you basically write all your ideas down, and then you try to arrange those ideas into a story. So let's take the falling down the stairs idea. So do we want that episode to be towards the beginning of the story? Like, maybe that's what makes our main character fall in love with their love interest. They saved them from falling down the staircase. So the episode technique is nice because it can help you arrange your ideas and make them more organized. So you can get an idea of where you want things to take place. Now, you could also arrange your episodes into the, the introduction, development, turn, conclusion method. You could write down all of your episode ideas or your random story ideas and then try to fit them into the introduction, development, turn, conclusion. So those are the ways that can help you go about plotting out your story ideas and arranging them into a plot idea. I hope this video was helpful to you and that you enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!